Brazilian football is quite literally insane. It's probably the worst place in the world to be a football head coach or a football manager. And most recently, we just had the Felipe Luis situation, which is crazy. But what if I told you it's just the tip of the iceberg? It's much worse than that. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Chapéu Football, where we provide the best coverage of Brazilian football in English. And as I said before, today I want to talk about the Felipe Luis situation with Flamengo, which it's insane. You're going to want to stick around so we can dive into the actual details of what happened and how this is an ongoing issue in Brazilian football as a whole. It's not just a Flamengo issue. It's all over the place in Brazil. It's freaking crazy. And very often here at the channel, we talk about the positives of Brazilian football. I love doing that. But we do need to also address the negatives. And we talked about the corruption in the past, but now we're going to dive into what happens with coaches in Brazil, which is nuts. It's terrible. And very often it's actually kind of stupid. Now, before we start, don't forget to drop a like in this video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Okay, let's begin. All right, there's a lot to cover here, so bear with me. We're going to be changing the screens back and forth. And since this is breaking news and we got to get this video out, we're going to do it old-fashioned style, just share screening and yapping and talking. So the breaking news that you all know by now, Filipe Luis has been fired by Flamengo. This happens after losing the Super Copa do Brasil, which is essentially a game between the winner of the league and the winner of the cup. It's really not worth that much. And the other one that he lost was the final of the Recopa of Comebol, which is the winner of the Libertadores, and the Copa Sul-Americana, which is like the winner of the Champions League versus the winner of the Europa League, okay? Another useless game. But he also won 8-0 in the state semifinals against Madureira, and he's going to play against Fluminense, or Flamengo is going to play, not Filipe Luis. The guy's out. He's fired. He won 8-0, and he got fired right after. So this is what's interesting about this, and that's why I want to share another screen here so you can see, because it's like, oh, so he started off poorly the season, right? Kinda, I would say. He kind of started off poorly. Flamengo, let's just say Flamengo was not off to a hot start of the season. But Felipe Luis has done tremendous work with Flamengo, right? He won the Brazilian League last season. He won the league, okay? That's like winning the Premier League in England, for example. He also won the Copa Libertadores, which is the Champions League. Could you imagine a coach in Europe, unless something extreme happened, like him punching a player or something, imagine him winning the Champions League and the Premier League and then getting fired early next season because he lost like the Community Shield, right? It's freaking stupid. But look at these numbers. The numbers are actually quite impressive. Flamengo under Felipe Luis, he had 101 games. He won 64 of those games. That means he's won like roughly 65% of the games he's won. He tied 22 and he lost 15. A lot of these losses were this year, obviously. That's a 70.6% win rate that they said. 184 goals scored, only 68 conceded, 46 clean sheets. Almost half of the games that he was in charge, they didn't concede a goal. Not a single goal. Okay? And he had 7 titles. He won 7 trophies in charge of Flamengo. Right. And most importantly, he won the Brazilian League and the Copa Libertadores, which are the 2 big trophies that he could win with them. He played, look, he was also in the Club World Cup of Flamengo, which I thought Flamengo did fairly well. They defeated Chelsea. Ultimately, they lost to Bayern in the knockout rounds. But again, that's Bayern Munich. So let's keep going forward with this video. The next thing you may be wondering is, why was he fired? Right? That's the next big question. It's like, and here's the thing with Brazil, there's no stability with coaches. And that's why I want to talk about this, which will be an issue. I'm going to talk about Brazil very soon. But let's go through the reasoning, and then we will go through what happens in Brazil, why this is so stupid. It's so dumb what happens in Brazil with coaches, how there's no stability. They just get fired like this no matter what. That we're going to talk about a rule they implemented back in 2021 where there was like a limit to how many coaches a club could have per season, because it was insane. There were teams that would have 4 or 5 coaches in the same season. Believe it or not, that happened. But The reasoning is bullshit. They say Felipe Luis faced wear and tear at Flamengo, not only due to poor results, which is bullshit, right? He had some poor results early this season, but look at what he did the previous season in 2025, right? But here's the thing. Look at this. This is important. But also because he wasn't the coach chosen by the current management. Flamengo had elections and they changed the president, the guy that was in charge. Felipe Luis is was the coach of Rodolfo Ladin, who was the club's president right last year. And then when Bapi, which is the new coach, took over the role now in 2026, he didn't fire Felipe Luis right away because there was no way to let him go after the Copa do Brasil title. Copa do Brasil, did he win the Copa do Brasil? No, no, no. He didn't win the Copa do Brasil. He won the Copa Libertadores and he won the Brazilian League. Okay, that's wrong. Whatever they put there was a translation. So essentially, let me just remove this for a second. Essentially, the new president, he came in and he wanted to fire Felipe Luis because it wasn't his guy right away. But he couldn't do it because the guy had just won literally everything that he could have, or at least the main trophies with Flamengo, the league and the Libertadores. You see how crazy it is in Brazil? It's like he might not be your guy, but the work he's done is incredible. You're going to fire him? And he wanted to. He just couldn't do it. So he was essentially waiting for some bad results so he could fire the guy. But let's keep going on. The 2025 titles elevated the coach's standing, of course, but the difficult contract renewal made the atmosphere heavier, and the scenario got much worse with a poor start to 2026. Also, one of the reasons why Flamengo had a poor start in 2026 was because their players came back from vacation later because they had to play the Intercontinental Cup against PSG. So I think that's important to point out. I think they were using their U20s or reserves for the first few games where they were struggling. And sure, they struggled with the starters as well, the main guys, but the season just started. Blah, blah, blah. They lost to Lanús in the Recopa and all of that. But here's the other thing that they talked about that I want to put here on screen. They also claimed that Felipe Luis was negotiating with a club in Europe. That's one thing that's been rumored. And the current Flamengo president actually addressed it just now. He said the Flamengo president, Bob, states that Felipe Luis negotiated with Chelsea. Yes, Chelsea, during the contract renewal talks with Flamengo and discusses the coach's dismissal. So he said, what's being said there really happened, the negotiation with Chelsea. So just so you all know, what's been reported there is that Felipe Luis was negotiating a renewal with Flamengo because his contract ends at the end of this year at 2026. And during those negotiation talks, he was also negotiating with Chelsea. But apparently it wasn't really Chelsea. It was the same ownership group. He was actually talking to Strasbourg. And I can assure you, he probably did not want to leave Flamengo for Strasbourg. So he came back to negotiate with Flamengo. And ultimately, he got fired right after. And it says, look, and just so you know, the president said that's not the main reason. So what's my point here? What am I trying to say overall? The reason Felipe Luis was actually fired was emotions. In Brazil, the decisions are usually emotional. So usually coaches are fired very quickly because of fan pressure. So they'll just fire him right away. Sometimes there are agents, right? Empresários in Brazil behind the scenes to get a coach fired so they can play their player. And I'm not accusing the Flamengo president of any of that because I don't know the reality. But the truth is he got fired because he's not that guy's guy. It's not really because of the results. Because if it was for the results, it would be very unfair. This guy won the Libertadores in the Brazilian League, and he's in the state final right now. And he's still in the Libertadores. He's still in the Brazilian League. He could win the league. So it's just really dumb. And the thing is, this is not a Flamengo problem. And that's why I wanted to talk about this in the video. This is a Brazil problem. This happens a lot in Brazil where they just fire the coaches like this. They call it, they even have a name for it in Brazil, which is called the Dança das Cadeiras, right? And for example, I'm going to give you this example here that I really want to show everyone. So this is an article from 2022, and it's in Portuguese, so I get it. Some of you are not going to understand, but this is what it essentially says. It says that a rule. So, okay, let me just explain to you everything it is. Ignore what's on screen and just listen to what I'm about to say. Okay, I'm going to read something for you. There was a rule or even a law in soccer in Brazil that was created in 2021, okay, and it was implemented where teams could only have two different coaches per season. However, In 2022, in February, this was taken down. Okay. It was taken down. All the clubs voted, and all the clubs were against it in 2022. And the reason for that is like, as I said, there's a lot of money that goes behind the scenes, right? Behind the doors or just like hidden in a shady way. I said the Felipe Luis is the tip of the iceberg. Agents working, right, to put their player. So they want to put their coach. An agent wants to put their coach where he will play his player. There's a lot of corruption and also presidents wanting to put their guy. It's not about results sometimes. I mean, a few teams do it, like Palmeiras. They've given Abel Ferreira stability, and you see the results paying off. Palmeiras has a lot of stability with Abel Ferreira, despite the bad 2025 season, which wasn't really even that bad. So the thing in Brazil is so crazy that they had to, in 2021, limit the amount of coaches that you could have in a season. I swear, there were teams that would have 4 to 5 coaches in the same season. And then in 2022, this was taken down. So teams were back with that nonsense. I'm going to give you one thing. If you go to our channel and you watch this video right here, this video, the worst coach in football history that we did about Ramon Menezes, you are going to see a great example of that dança das cadeiras that I talked to you about. How Ramon Menezes kept just getting fired and finding a new club, and he would coach like 3 different teams in the same season. Go watch that video, the worst coach in football history, about Ramon Menezes. It is freaking insane. But look at this too. I'm going to give you a example of a very popular coach that many of you probably know, even if you're not Brazilian. Most recently, Dorival Jr. He coached the Brazilian national team, right? It was an embarrassment. He was terrible with the Brazilian national team. But this guy is a perfect example of what happens in Brazil, right? If you go on his Wikipedia page and you just look at his manager career, right, as a head coach, it started in 2002. Okay, 2002. So that's been what, 24 years. Look at how many teams he's coached. Let's go through it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 different jobs. Sometimes he repeats the teams, right? He's coached Flamengo here in 2012. He's coached Flamengo again in 2022. So sometimes he repeats the teams, but he's had 27 different coaching jobs in 24 years in Brazil. That's more than one team per season. Why? Because these guys in Brazil get fired left and right. No matter how good of a job they do, if you suck for like 5 games next season, they fire you. There's no stability. Being a head coach or a football coach in Brazil is a bloody nightmare. The only good thing is that Felipe Luis is going to still get paid. So when it comes to money, you're fine. They get paid a lot of money. And when they get fired, they also get paid. But from a career perspective, there's no stability. It's really freaking stupid. Now, I want to give you an example of one thing here real quick. For example, if you go to Abel Ferreira, that's the Palmeiras coach, okay? And you guys know I'm a Palmeiras fan, and Palmeiras fans have been a little bit crazy. They wanted Abel Ferreira fired, and I know Palmeiras struggled last season. But Abel Ferreira essentially took over in the post-COVID era, right? When he took over Palmeiras. It was during the post-COVID, it was like 2020 and beyond. During this time, he won the Brazilian League twice. He won the Brazilian Cup once. He won the Libertadores twice. And then he won obviously the state championship 3 times, and he might win it again this season. But ignore the state championship. Let's talk about the big 3, the Brazilian League, the Libertadores, and the Brazilian Cup, right? From 2020 till now, he's pretty much won the same amount of trophies as Flamengo there. I think Flamengo won the league twice. They won the cup. They might have won twice, the Brazilian Cup, and the Libertadores twice. So Flamengo has 1 cup more. Flamengo spends a lot more money than Palmeiras, by the way. The difference between Palmeiras and Flamengo, I think Palmeiras has more stability. Flamengo has a lot of ups and downs. And even last season, where people were shitting on Palmeiras continuously, Abel Ferreira finished in 2nd in the Brazilian League, and he finished in 2nd in the Copa Libertadores. For any rational fan base, that is not a bad season. If you go to Europe, like as a fan, if you go to Europe, would they be frustrated if they finish 2nd in their league and 2nd in the Champions League? Yes. But would any rational fan say that's a bad season? Details, man. Let's be rational. But again, in Brazil, that's not how it works, right? It's based on politics, corruption, and emotions. Those three, right? Politics, like Felipe Luis, the president didn't want him, you fire him. Corruption, that's when agents are working behind to put their coach, right? They're working on closed doors so they can put their coach so the coach can play their player so they can make money and maybe sell them to Europe or the well, whatever, right? And the other one is emotions. They don't think rationally. That's like, hey, give the coach time to work. And Felipe Luis has done a tremendous job in 2025, and he should be given more time. He was fired after an 8-0 win, by the way, making it to the state championship final. So it's just complete and utter nonsense. This thing of lack of stability with Brazilian coaches is probably one of the reasons why Brazilian coaches these days suck. They don't have stability to actually implement their work. It's complete and utter nonsense, and that's all that I want to talk about today. The Felipe Luis situation on its own is crazy, but it's not a big problem. But the problem is the Felipe Luis situation, which is crazy, is actually normal in Brazilian football. Okay, I'm out.